Picture long ago in Japan. You've got these incredibly rich lords, the samurai, who just absolutely loved the spotlight. They wore loud, clunky, shiny armor and literally yelled out their own names on the battlefield so everyone would notice them. But here's the catch. Wearing loud armor makes you terrible at spying. Samurai rules said sneaking around was entirely dishonorable. But if you actually want to win wars, you desperately need to know what the enemy is planning. They needed completely different helpers, people entirely willing to break the rules. So where do you find people like that? High up in the isolated, Rocky Mountain towns of Asaga and Koka. Today, we call them ninjas, but back then, they were known as shinobi, and that word simply means someone who hides well. They lived so far up in these tall, jagged mountains that strangers just never really bothered going there, leaving them totally alone to figure out how to protect themselves. The wild thing is, these towns didn't have rich lords looking out for them. They were just simple, lordless farmers trying to survive. And farming in hard, rocky mountains is incredibly tough work. To make it through freezing winters, they needed extra money for food. So they banded together and started trading their unique survival and hiding skills for silver coins. They basically turned their everyday knowledge into a business, doing the dirty, secret-finding jobs that the shiny samurai were way too proud to do themselves. Survival was always the goal here, not useless pride. A true shinobi never, ever wanted a fair fight. If you're fighting, you risk getting caught, and getting caught ruins the entire secret mission. Think of it exactly like a delivery driver navigating through a massive hurricane. Fighting the storm doesn't actually prove anything because the package only matters if you make it to the destination. Dead spies can't deliver messages. Which brings us to their smartest move, totally stripping away that modern myth of the black pajama suit. Wearing solid black at night actually turns you into a weird, solid, moving shadow. Their true genius was the art of being totally boring. They just dressed as dirty, everyday farmers. They figured out that invisibility isn't about magic. It's about making guards look right at you and decide to completely ignore you because you look perfectly normal. Growing up in these mountains wasn't exactly a normal childhood. Shinobi families taught kids to memorize huge, long messages, so absolutely nothing had to be written down. They practiced walking in absolute silence and trained their minds to completely ignore deep, paralyzing fear. And they learned to read evening weather patterns. Rain was their absolute best friend because it covered the sound of breaking wood, and thick clouds hid the bright light of the moon. And that same grounded logic applied to their gear. You've probably seen kunai in cartoons, showing up as magical flying daggers. In reality, they were absolutely nothing of the sort. Kunai were just heavy iron digging tools used by everyday farmers to move hard dirt. Shinobi strictly used them to dig under wooden walls or pry open locked windows. If guards stopped them and saw kunai, they wouldn't care. They just resembled completely safe, boring farm tools. When things did go wrong, they had desperate tools strictly meant for safe escapes. They used caltrips, which were just simple, sharp metal spikes you throw on the dirt to stop chasing guards in their tracks. And they'd pack small, dark powder smoke bombs. They weren't trying to blow anything up. They just needed brilliant flashes and thick smoke so they could safely vanish back into the trees. But honestly, clever words were always way more powerful than heavy iron. Really smart spies wouldn't bother climbing tall, dangerous walls. They just walked directly through front gates. They'd confidently lie to guards about being sick, or whisper false stories to the enemy about giant armies coming, completely terrifying young soldiers. It's exactly like having fake backstage passes. Confidently fibbing your way straight through the front door is way easier and way less tiring than trying to scale high fences in the dark. Because at the end of the day, information is the most powerful weapon. We're talking about a completely broken, incredibly bloody time in Japan known as the Warring States period, where nobody was safe. Desperate warlords were constantly buying secrets, while shinobi were out there suffering quietly. They were crawling under castles in freezing mud, counting enemy horses in the dark, all just to feed their families back in the mountains. And that quiet independence eventually brought genuine tragedy. The fierce warlord Oda Nobunaga demanded total obedience from every town. The Iga people simply ignored him. When Nobunaga sent his son's massive army to punish them, Iga fighters set clever traps and completely defeated him. But Nobunaga was furious. Years later, he returned with a crushing, unstoppable force. Small villages stood absolutely no chance. He burned their beautiful mountains to ashes. It was a deeply brutal time. But lucky survivors managed to slip away into the dark. They ended up being hired by an incredibly smart lord named Tokugawa Ieyasu. Ieyasu trusted these loyal men from the mountains, giving them food and safe homes, and they paid him back. Later, when enemies were chasing Ieyasu through dangerous mountains, Local shinobi guided him safely home, protecting him from bandits. He never forgot that loyalty. Eventually, the whole world shifted. Ieyasu became the absolute top ruler of Japan. He gave those brave men special guard jobs at his massive castle in Tokyo. He brought profound peace over the entire country. Bloody wars finally stopped, but tragically, deep peace meant the need for stolen war secrets completely vanished. These master spies were reduced to simple police officers, just checking bags at front gates. It brought this heavy sadness to the old grandfathers. They watched young boys abandon the quiet skills of hiding, favoring loud sword fighting instead. They worried their history would just disappear. So masters decided to lock their secrets down on paper pages. They wrote giant books, such as the famous Banzen Shukai, preserving hidden arts, secret passwords, tools, and perfect star reading skills before they faded forever. But since real spies faded away, normal people started missing exciting spy stories. Bored storytellers began inventing magic wizards to make tales more fun. At the same time, theater directors were using stagehands dressed in dark clothes to quietly move heavy props, people audiences intuitively knew to just ignore. Until some clever theater director decided to have stagehands in dark clothes suddenly attack the hero. Audiences were completely surprised, and almost instantly, the false myth of the scary night monster was accidentally born. It's wild to look at how much the myth twisted the truth. Old artists drew them walking on water or controlling giant magic toads. Modern movies gave them shiny metal throwing stars, which are actually super loud and annoying to carry, and glowing swords. It's exactly like watching professional wrestling on television, where the gritty, quiet reality of actual combat is completely traded away for loud costumes, flashy fireworks, and a really good show. It really makes you wonder, why do we always trade hard truths for easy fun? Why did we trade the visceral history of poor farmers holding their breath in freezing, dirty water just to survive the night for plastic throwing stars and silly morning cartoons? Because the reality of just barely surviving the night is so much less pretty than samurai fighting for huge personal glory in sunlit duels. But the truth of poor, simple farmers outsmarting rich lords with endless resources, that is a vastly superior human story. It's about everyday humans solving totally impossible problems. And it proves that ideas simply cannot be destroyed. Even though Nobunaga burned their homes to ashes, he couldn't touch their teamwork or their clever minds. Iga ideas survived. They saved their lord from death, and those very same ideas eventually helped build an entirely peaceful Japan. The lessons they left behind in those dusty books are entirely timeless. They teach us to watch the world carefully, to use nature to hide rather than fighting against it, to value cool information over hot anger. It's a beautiful reminder to look past movie ninjas and honor brave, everyday people hiding in the dark rain with simple digging tools. Because magic is incredibly easy to write in stories, but mastering real skills takes lifetimes of quiet, exhausting hard work. That is the only real magic. They prove forever that tiny, unseen actions can literally alter the course of massive wars. It all comes down to the profound truth that deep intelligence will always beat loud force. True power doesn't need bright lights because the greatest victories happen in total silence. Man, history is just endlessly wild when you actually peel back the layers. If you vibe with uncovering these hidden truths as much as I do, hit that like button, share this with someone who appreciates good mysteries, and make sure to subscribe so we can keep exploring together. Catch you later!